Depressing fact of life for you, it's never been harder to be universally loved in pro wrestling than it is right now. You get pushed as the top babyface, everyone hates you because you're being shoved down their throats. You make a natural and genuine connection with the audience, you get booked in a way that never satisfies everyone. Social media has been great for wrestling in many ways, but the constant fantasy booking and shipping of your faves is also quite bad. But from the rotting carcasses of these creative failures often comes a low-key appreciation for the men and women who've had them thrust upon them. Sometimes it's years after the fact, sometimes it's years after their life, but true talent always does get over eventually. Granted, it might not be too much comfort to know that everyone thinks you're great long after your chance to post some career-defining work in the spotlight has passed, but hey, it's better than a kick in the cock, right, Dustin? My name is Adam Cleary, and these are 10 failed wrestlers who became cult classics. Number 10, Hakushi. A super worker from a period WWE doesn't shine nearly enough spotlight on. WhatCulture.com's Benjamin Richardson once rather astutely noted that Hakushi's in-ring work was as ahead of the time as his character was behind it. Watched with frustration in the present day, WWE's cloy Americanizing of the character after a babyface turn missed the point entirely. He'd earned cheers because his matches were too magnificent to boo. Battles with Bret Hart, the 1-2-3 Kid, and others on a supremely gifted and hard-working roster were routinely the best of the time. In WWE, less than 2 years total, his back catalogue became a must-watch for fans playing catch-up with the era years later. Not least of all thanks to the clashes such as this firecracker with Bret Hart being put over by the Hitman himself as a personal favourite. Go watch it. Number 9, Diesel. People like Diesel now, I'm told. You see, the problem he used to have was that most things can be proved with statistics. And for decades, the horrendous box office and buy rate figures for his 1995 run were, well, horrendous. But thanks to the network, we can now easily see the matches against Bret Hart, Razor Ramon, Shawn Michaels, and Jeff Jarrett that prove his worth as a performer. Plus, with cool things just being cool again, we're remembering that the Diesel gimmick was the coolest thing on the show until Vince McMahon the hell out of it. Nash effectively invented the tweener role, and his cult status now shows why Bischoff spent the family silverware on him back in the day. Number 8, Waylon Mercy. Known these days for providing much of the inspiration for the original Bray Wyatt persona, Waylon Mercy was lionized more for what he wasn't than for what he was. Weirdly, Mercy showed no particular in-ring aptitude in his brief opportunities, and like every other poor soul on the roster back then, he certainly didn't draw. He was, however, absolutely pissing terrifying. In WWE's new generation, this was extremely useful. Decked out in all white to subvert his dark art, Mercy's promos were equally grisly behind a friendly conceit. Aping Cape Fear's serial killer Max Cady in cadence and delivery, Mercy was a tremendous tribute for those fans that knew, and a legitimate horror show for those that didn't. Not going to recommend you watch any of his matches, obviously, but dig out some of those promos in your spare time and enjoy the terror. Number 7, Mark Henry. It does actually seem pretty harsh to call Mark Henry a failure in light of a tenure that is more than worthy of his WWE Hall of Fame ring, but people forget for a long time he was their greatest shame. Overexcitedly signing him to a decade-long deal in 1996, Vince McMahon tried to chase him out for years with various humiliating gimmicks and storylines. Sexual chocolate, Mae Young, The Hand, that grisly China angle, a lesser man would have packed up his bags and walked. But to Henry's credit, he persisted, and by the time of his 2013 Salmon Jacket Apex, the fans spoke up and helped get the world's strongest man a run with one of the organization's top belts. It was long overdue even back then, but now his status as a WWE legend and a locker room leader is entirely well deserved. Number 6, Goldust. Haha, yes, now you're probably thinking that I'm going to be talking about that AEW match the other week, and that moment when his head was spitting blood further than Gangrel, hearing a very problematic joke, but no, it's actually way before that. Linking arms with Dad Dusty and half-brother Cody against the Authority's Hounds of Justice in 2013, Goldust was perhaps the most vital component in that feud, but still did everything he could to make it about everyone else. Bringing his experience and a genuine connection with the fans to the clashes, he carried the in-ring and emotional heft in equal measure. WWE, to their inherent stupidity, then allowed him to rot. As a result, the cult support around the Bizarre One is way beyond anything he'd ever achieved in his peak, and that seminal Double or Nothing encounter showed the entire world at long last what WWE had wasted for 3 decades. Number 5, Yokozuna. Okay, so straight up, this gimmick and the title push it led to were rooted in actual racism. No buts, having a Samoan do a Japanese gimmick and then just all of the other stuff and what Hogan called. No, it's just all really unpleasant. But even a woke libtard SJW cuck such as myself must acknowledge that focusing squarely on the problematic nature of it all does do a disservice to the worker underneath. The performances that Big Rodney was putting in during those early 90s really helped steer the company through some choppy waters. Debuting at a listed £505 before bulking up to 641 and God knows what after that, Yoko still moved about like a man a quarter of his size. The totals may have been arbitrary to a point, but the visuals did away with the need for the massaging of the figures. He was legit an in-ring great and still remains the 3rd fastest newcomer to win the WWE Championship. Number 4, Doink. In what might well be the earliest possible warning sign for how Vince McMahon would eventually book the entire company, babyface Doink was an absolute joke tailored to the comedic tastes of one man alone. But once that man got bored and let him write himself as a force of evil, he was brilliant. A violent assault on Crush at the start of 1993 provided the physical intervention required to explain why the gimmick was no laughing matter. Playing the role with vile snark and sinister intent, Matt Bourne's ability to snap between wide-eyed and wicked-hearted was mesmeric. Despite being let go later that year for persistent drug and alcohol issues, he still had so much more to offer the gimmick, if not the WWE. He did the territories, he did ECW, he did some independent promotions, as well as the odd return to WWE. Wherever he went though, people would still point and say, "Oh look, there's that silly wrestling clown," all the while missing the true genius of the character was his sinister turn years prior. Number 3, Kientai. Yeah, just a quick heads up here, anybody who puts choppy or pee-pee in the comments of this video gets arrested on the spot by the internet police. Taka Michinoku's boy-popping antics as a member of Suzuki Gun in New Japan have, in recent years at least, kept alive memories of his fabled Kientai run. Before we start, it was, back then, a very different time. A collection of killers in Japan, the group's Attitude Era incarnation started with good intentions, but, as you might imagine, quickly degenerated into a marginalized malfunction within months. The group debuted by battering Taka before then welcoming him in after Val Venus, let's say, worked a split shift with Michinoku's sister. With those Godzilla dubbing gimmicks, Taka and Funaki got over all over again as crowd pleasers during a time that popular stars were at a premium. Considering the deep-rooted bias within the organization, it was a credit to their craft and graft that they managed to find a place at all. Never mind all the way here in 2019. Number 2, PCO. In an effort to prove his inhuman endurance over WrestleMania weekend, PCO took a powerbomb from the ring directly to the arena floor. Only when the Madison Square Garden crowd had fully absorbed the shock did he sit up straight, screaming with pleasure at the pain he just experienced. This is his life now. PCO's latter career reinvention as the masochistic psychopath was for this very moment. He couldn't have predicted the specifics, but his intent to take a bow on the grandest possible stage available to him went better than he could ever have imagined. He'd landed back first, but he'd also fallen on his feet in the world's most famous arena. 25 years earlier, he was a Quebecer wrestling man on a mission in the very same building at one of the most celebrated WrestleManias of all time. He wasn't, however, a talking point or a ticket seller, just as he wasn't a super worker who just happened to be a pirate a year later. It took over 2 decades for the industry to catch up with his potential offering. Number 1, RTruth. God, do you remember when they unveiled the 24/7 championship? Remember when Foley pulled that just absolute monstrosity out of the bag and the entire crowd collectively did just a small splutter noise? God, that was not even 2 months ago. This year is going to kill me. Anyway though, what followed from that was RTruth yet again getting something dreadful from creative and getting both it and himself over. Finally though, with the 24/7 championship, everyone seems to be cottoning on to this. I mean, come on, the guy got a literal figment of his imagination over in Little Jimmy. Average wrestlers cannot do that. Making himself Teflon to WWE's atrocious scripting in recent years, Truth's actively bantered it off whilst becoming indispensable as a result. He is at this point not so much a credit to the process, but one in spite of it. If you take one thing away from this list, and I pray that you take this one thing away from this list, it is that I absolutely adore RTruth, and I truly, madly, honestly want to be his friend. Somebody tweet him. So there you have it, those are 10 failed wrestlers who went on to be cult classics. Read to you by a man you claimed you couldn't stand 2 years ago, but who is now the undisputed king of YouTube. Let us know what you made of it all in the comments below, and of course don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. But in the meantime though, thank you so much for watching. I, of course, been Adam Cleary. You can get me on Twitter at Adam Cleary, CLERY, and I'll see you soon.